While many folks think of broadband as an infrastructure issue, it's really one that has to be viewed as a workforce solution for our states as well. Certainly pleased to get to share some of the work that Montana is doing to make broadband connectivity a reality for all of our citizens. If you live in one of Montana's urban areas, it's likely, certainly, that you'll have access to reliable and high-speed broadband. Our best data indicates about 92% of urban Montanans have access to broadband. If you look nationally, it's about 97% of people in urban areas have access to broadband. We also know that high-speed connectivity gives students access to that 21st century classroom, prepares them to live in that rapidly advancing technology-driven market. We also know it's going to foster economic development by supporting small businesses, creating jobs. But if you live in a rural community in Montana, geography, low population, all of it discourages investment by many telecommunications companies. That means only about 59% of rural Montanans have access to broadband and the opportunities that come with it. And this isn't just a frontier state issue. If we look across the country, only about 65% of people in this country in rural areas have access. So during my administration, we've tried to take steps, several approaches to kind of bridge that gap between rural and urban communities. In 2015, the state of Montana and I, began a partnership with a nonprofit group called Education Superhighway to increase access to affordable high-speed broadband in Montana schools. If I look back then in 2015, only about 3/4 of our schools could access broadband in accordance with the Federal Communications Commission's minimum goals. Over that 5-year period now, 100% of our K-12 students have access to broadband. It's really equipping those schools with that 21st century technology, allowing teachers to be innovative, preparing students to be successful in our modern and changing workforce. In that 5-year period alone, over 60% of our schools have been upgraded to fiber. And for all of our schools, medium bandwidth has increased by nearly 5 times. And we've also been able to then drive down the cost because the median cost of bandwidth has decreased by 76% over that same 5-year period. Now, we know Montana students, whether they live in urban or rural communities, are now receiving the best education possible to be successful in a modern economy. Never forget a trip I took to eastern Montana, a town called Plevna. Could almost be mistaken because it's near Governor Burgum in North Dakota. Has a population of 163 people. Participated in an hour of code with dang near their whole school, which was about a dozen kids. But that 1-hour introduction to computer science is designed to show that anybody can learn the basics and to encourage students to start looking at careers in high-demand fields. And that wouldn't have been possible, certainly, had the school not been equipped with high-speed fiber connections. Those students from that small farming community likely wouldn't have had the same access to computer science coursework as their more urban counterparts. Broadband in our schools is critical to ensuring equity of opportunity for all students. We look at it as a federal investment that, and it's interesting hearing the speaker say about a $3 or $4 trillion infrastructure deficit. Some would say it'd be about $61 billion to get rural connectivity. We still can't wait, though, just for the federal government to take those steps. We've also looked into ways to establish connectivity beyond our classrooms in small towns. Earlier this year, I tasked my lieutenant governor with touring a handful of small Montana towns, identified tangible ways to expand economic opportunities in rural and our tribal communities. We heard from those community leaders and stakeholders about their opportunities, their challenges, look for ways that public or private partnerships could actually assist. And one of the consistent things that we heard was lack of reliable broadband, holding communities back from reaching their full potential. One of those communities is a town called Troy. It's about 1,000 people in northwest Montana. It's indeed a small community, has so much to offer, located on the banks of a river, scenic mountains, attract residents and visitors alike for its abundance of outdoor recreation opportunities. But without broadband, new businesses are really discouraged from establishing themselves in Troy. Growth of any existing businesses is limited and new technologies confined. To address that, we partnered with both our local stakeholders and the Telecommunications Association, brought in Deloitte Consulting to develop what would be a connectivity roadmap outlining the steps to make high-speed, quality broadband a reality for Troy. Creating that map took about 12 weeks of engaging with stakeholders, hosting those planning workshops, but the result was really that framework that laid out the challenges, the approaches to address them, and most importantly, specific next steps to move forward. Funding Toolkit explains the funding resources, makes recommendations for the best options for Troy. There's 51 different federal broadband loan and grant programs. Communities need help actually navigating those complex processes. And as Troy moves forward now with it on its own project, we anticipate that roadmap is going to be a guide for other communities, help connect the nearly 40% of Montanans still without reliable connectivity. We know that already in 5 years, efforts to expand broadband have made a meaningful difference for our Montana students. Our future progress on that issue will bring economic opportunity then to those rural communities, also ensure that they have the resources to thrive. This really is an area where I think governors can make a difference and find solutions, especially if we look for ways to engage in partnerships and as governors continue to work together. The policies and innovative ideas that we can put into place to enhance broadband in both our rural and our urban area communities have an impact on every person that we serve. So thanks for allowing me to share a little bit of Montana's successes and challenges